Welcome, welcome, welcome. And to all who are watching, enter if you dare. Case number 09114772, missing person George Smith Sr., age 79, of Togiak, Alaska, last seen April 30th, 2009. That's how the file reads. That's how it read for 17 years. Then, this July, someone finally added a second line to it. And what that line says will make you look differently at every river you've ever trusted. I'm the Archivist. Open the file. Togiak sits on the southwest edge of Alaska, a village of a few hundred people on the shore of Bristol Bay, where hunting on the spring ice is not a hobby. It's how families feed themselves through the year. George Smith Sr. had done it his whole life. 79 years old and still comfortable on a snow machine. Still reading ice the way younger hunters never fully learn to. On April 30th, 2009, he set out with a hunting companion along the Ungalikthluk River, the route he and generations before him had crossed 1,000 times. Spring ice is deceptive. It can hold weight one crossing and fail the next, and by the time the sound changes under the machine, there's rarely time to react. People outside rural Alaska sometimes hear these stories and assume it's about recklessness. It almost never is. Elders like Smith read ice the way pilots read weather, current, temperature, the sound of a machine's engine change in pitch. But a river doesn't owe anyone consistency. It can be solid enough to hold a loaded snow machine at 9 in the morning and be rotten by early afternoon, especially in spring, when warm air works the ice from above and moving current works it from below at the same time, invisibly, until the two meet in the middle. His companion watched it happen. The ice gave way. The river took him. Search and rescue teams combed the Ungalikthluk in the days after, the way they always do. Grid patterns, dogs, aircraft passes over open water. They found nothing. No machine, no gear, no body. The river simply closed back over whatever it had taken, and after weeks of searching, the case did what missing in water cases in rural Alaska often do. It went quiet, not because anyone stopped caring, but because there was nothing left to search. 6 months later, in October of 2009, something washed ashore on Nunivak Island. Look at a map before you keep listening, because this is the detail investigators themselves couldn't get past for 17 years. Nunivak Island isn't downriver from Togiak. It isn't even close. It sits far out in the Bering Sea, separated from the mainland by open, brutal ocean water, the kind no search grid from a river disappearance would ever have reason to cover. Remains were recovered on that shoreline in 2009, unidentified. No missing person report from that region matched a location that far from where anyone had gone missing. So the remains were logged, catalogued, and held. One more unidentified case in a system that, at the time, had no way to connect a body on a remote island to a man who vanished through river ice 100 and some miles away. For 17 years, George Smith Sr. was a missing person in one file and an unidentified set of remains in another. Nobody had reason to open both folders side by side. That changed because of a program most people have never heard of. Alaska's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Unit, MMIP, was formed to do exactly this kind of work. Go back through decades of unresolved cases involving Alaska native and rural communities and actively pursue leads that standard casework had exhausted. Investigators began systematically collecting DNA reference samples from the families of the regions long missing. Smith's relatives gave theirs. Their samples were entered into NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, the same federal database quietly closing cold cases across the country. Somewhere in that system, a match fired. The DNA from Smith's family lined up with the unidentified remains recovered on Nunivak Island back in 2009. 17 years, 100 miles of open ocean, and 2 separate case files finally collapsed into one name. Investigators describe moments like this almost clinically. A match, a confirmation, a notification sent up the chain. But sit with the actual mechanics of it for a second. A body entered the water on a river that empties eventually into Bristol Bay. From there, it would have had to travel through open, often violent ocean current for months before ever reaching a shoreline as remote as Nunivak's. Search planners in 2009 had no reason to extend their grid that far. No case in the department's memory had ever required it. The distance itself is why the file stayed open for 17 years. Nobody was looking in the wrong place. They simply had no reason to believe the right place existed. On July 14, 2026, Alaska State Troopers made it official. The remains found on Nunivak Island in October 2009 belonged to George Smith Sr. For his family, 17 years of not knowing ended with a phone call. Not a body pulled from the ice where he vanished, a body that had somehow crossed open ocean water to a shore he likely never set foot on in life, and waited there, uncatalogued and unnamed, for nearly 2 decades. How his remains traveled that distance across the Bering Sea, from a frozen inland river to a remote outer island, is a question investigators still can't fully answer. Currents, storms, the slow, violent math of an Alaskan winter. It's the most likely explanation, and also the one that offers the least comfort. The ocean took 17 years to give an answer nobody had thought to ask it for. Smith's case is not unusual in scale. It's unusual only in the fact that it closed. Alaska has one of the highest per capita rates of missing and unidentified persons cases in the entire country, and rural, coastal, and indigenous communities are disproportionately represented in that number. For decades, geography itself worked against these families. A body could travel further in a single storm than search parties could cover in a month. And until DNA databases like NamUs matured enough to compare unidentified remains against family reference samples nationwide, a case like Smith's had almost no mechanical way to ever resolve. The MMIP unit's methodical, unglamorous work, collecting samples, filing them, waiting for matches that might take years to surface, is precisely what finally gave his family an answer the search parties of 2009 never could have found on their own. Every unidentified case sitting in a system like NamUs right now is somebody's missing person, filed under a name no one has connected yet. George Smith Sr. spent 17 years as 2 disconnected files in 2 different places. It took a DNA program built specifically to find people like him to finally close the distance between them. I'm the Archivist. This file is closed. There are thousands more still open, still waiting for someone to connect the dots. Subscribe, and I'll keep opening them with you.
If you enjoyed this, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be notified of all of our future videos.